Hi, this is Scotty Elcon with Selig Film News. We're here with Abigail Fuller, the co-producer and co-director of Do You Dream in Color? You know, this is such an amazing project that you guys have this USC connection, and you guys have a great team, and then you decide, let's tackle this interesting subject.
Sure.
What made you guys want to do this thing in particular, and when you first asked the blind organizations around California, what was that experience like?
Good question. Yeah, I mean, the film we actually shot 6 years ago. So it's funny now, 6 years later, recalling all of these memories, which we've been having to do as we go to festivals. But when we first set out to make the film, as the title implies, Do You Dream in Color, the idea was, I wonder what the dreams of blind people are like. And it was around the time that Waltz with Bashir had come out, and Paris Police and Linkletter, and these were all films that inspired me in film school. So the idea of an animated film seemed interesting. But when we spent time with the actual teenagers that were blind and visually impaired, we realized that what was happening in their lives was way more compelling than their dreams, which were just the same as most people. It was like, I'm eating a sandwich, or I was doing my homework. So that content also became very dense because we collected all these interviews from neuroscientists and cognitive dream psychologists, but they were like lectures, and they were very academic, and it basically realized it was becoming two films, and the film that we felt was the most powerful and the most important and the most poignant and interesting was this interesting human experience, this coming of age story of a group of people that a lot of people don't know much about.
You found 4 really amazing kids.
Yeah.
I know you found more, but for these 4, what was it about them individually that just stood out to you and Sarah?
So when we were first casting, we would go to blind camps, and we would go to volunteer at different organizations, and we were just trying to go through this casting process of finding an articulate, interesting, diverse group of teenagers that we could kind of look at different versions of the blind experience. And Karina, for example, has issues that are related to economics, and Connor has issues that are socially. And then you have kind of institutional issues that Sarah faces. So with all 4 stories, we were able to kind of show different obstacles that you can face as a blind teenager, whether it be getting along with people at school, or being seen differently, or literally just having, not the right advocacy and support system within, your school district. So that was a huge thing that we wanted to tell, that complete experience, and have each of these 4 kids represent different issues within the community. But really, it's just their character, that it came down to, we wanted people that you could fall in love with and be engaged with and empathize with and feel like, oh, I remember I was in a band, or I can barely skate, but this kid can do it, and he can like talk passionately about it, and talk passionately about being a teenager. And so I think it was really their enthusiasm and the energy that drew us to them, and hopefully other people.
Yeah, definitely. They're very inspirational. I'm curious, 3 of the 4 were born blind,
Right.
and then 1 sadly had something happen while a surgery.
Right.
What was it like dealing with that aspect of it for that botched surgery, like trying to tackle that emotional subject, because that must still hurt that's happened?
That was always an underlying issue throughout the rest of Karina's life, whereas the other 3 felt like, I'm blind, I don't know what vision is, therefore I don't really miss it. I don't really feel like I'm at a loss. It's as though I said, hey, Gotti, there's a sixth sense that you don't know about. And you might say, oh, cool, I'd love to know what that's like, but you're not going to walk around every day and feel like at a loss because you've never had it. So with Karina, here's somebody who learned to navigate her world without a cane, being able to read books, being able to interact without having special access. And then suddenly at age 12, was suddenly, she had to relearn everything again. So that, I think, is difficult because she always identifies more as a sighted person who had something taken away. And that was a very traumatic thing to have to recover from. So that has, it was only 6 years after that we filmed with her. So she'd made huge strides, but wasn't quite there. And I think at this point in her life, now that it's been almost 10 years since that surgery, she is really kind of, completely independent, has come into her own, and is like really flourished, as a blind individual.
What was it like getting to know the families? I mean, for them to let you into their home and to communicate with their children. I know that they have to deal with so much more than maybe a regular parent, and yet they open their doors to you guys.
Right. The families were a huge integral part in us being able to make the film. We literally would sleep on the couches of Nick's family, who would open their doors and, share wine and food. And Connor's family was just so welcoming, and they really helped. They helped us send out our Kickstarter fundraiser. They were there to feed us every once in a while. So it was, and they really felt like this was an important story to tell, because raising a blind child, when your child is born, it's like, oh, this, they didn't have other places to look in the media or sources to say, oh, look, you can be a skateboarder, you can, play in a metal band, or you can go travel the world. They didn't know what to expect for a blind teenager, so they saw this, as did we, as a tool to share with other families and young blind people about, you can do anything any other sighted kid is doing, and even better.
Do you mind if I ask a Trojan question? You
Please.
guys, what was that dynamic like? It's not every time that you guys get to know people through school and through film school and befriend
Right.
people, and then you make this powerful film together that obviously still has a complete life to it.
Yeah.
What was that like, knowing that it was a Trojan-made film?
Well, our other producer was from UT Austin, so we had, at its core, it started right with Sarah Ivy and I, and then our cinematographer Bobby, who also went to USC, but it never quite it took on a life of its own, where it became more about this Do You Dream in Color family, and less so an offshoot of USC. It was just that happened to be the place that we met. But there is, they do call it the USC, they say USC Mafia and things like that. I live in New York, so I'm not as much within that world as the Southern California folk are. But it was a great place to suddenly have people where you could say, I have this idea, I want to go out and make it. And there were other people around you who said, yeah, let's do it. It was a great environment to have other really smart, really ambitious people who wanted to do the same things that you did. So coming from different parts of the country, for me coming from upstate New York, suddenly to be around a bunch of people who were like, yeah, I want to make movies too, was really helped to kind of, I think, foster our ability to go out and say, all right, we can do this. Let's take it on.
There's an interesting dynamic in the film that, these kids are not all at the same high school, and they're not all maybe even the same city. You guys kind of had to travel to cover their stories. What
Right.
What was the logistical parts of that, but also, was that fun to you guys were a traveling band, basically?
Because I was 22 when we started filming this, and it was a group of friends. Like I said, there was this Do You Dream in Color family where we would get in the car and blast Taylor Swift or whatever and road trip up to NorCal. It became, it was an adventure. It was almost like summer camp sometimes. We were working really hard and trying to make sure that we had places to stay and we could afford the cost of all of our production, and make sure that we were on point with story. And there was a lot of work to be done, but because I think we were young and excited, and it was a group of friends making the film, it really is an experience I look back very fondly on.
You know, earlier you talked about influences. You had a particular mindset going into it, and you guys were going a certain route. When you switched, did you take a step back and look at inspirations for now, what you're doing, or did you just didn't have time? You just had to tackle it and see what you guys came up with?
Well, I think that, a lot of the films that we loved that were character ensemble pieces, for example, were American Teen and Mad Hot Ballroom, and I'm trying to think about there's been several other kind of films that, Billy the Kid, which was also produced by Chiyomi Kurosawa, who's one of the producers on our film, also has a similar coming of age story. So there were several films that we looked towards tonally that were a better match for what our characters were going through. So I think at one point we just hoped that we could merge these two. We could make this hybrid. What would happen if you took Nanette Bernstein and Linkletter and you made this hybrid film? And so we're trying to do something new, and what we realized is that it felt like two different films, and that we had to kind of make a choice to go down one way or the other. It was almost, I don't want to say at the last hour, but after a lot of work was put into trying to make that hybrid work, it seemed that the film was stronger. It was a better film, just really letting the kids themselves tell their stories of their experience rather than us trying to hire artists to come up with what their dreams were. So that's a whole long story that took place over a few years in the edit room. As most documentarians can tell you, it's a very long, can be a very long process, to figure out exactly what your movie is, even after you've shot it.
Would have been definitely a dynamic hybrid, just the concept there, Looking at being here at Dallas International Film Festival, Sarah's got connections here. As you said, you have producers that are from the state. What's it mean to be a part of the festival? And also, you guys do have a very unique quality to the screenings, and can you touch upon that?
Well, what do you mean by a unique quality to the screenings?
Well, you guys have an added to help in impairment.
Sure.
Which other screenings won't have.
Great.
Yeah.
It's incredibly exciting to be here. Like I said, I'm from the East Coast, but our film there's a lot of Texans involved in this project, and this is actually my first time to Dallas, so it's an exciting reason to come out here and eat good Tex-Mex and see a lot of really great films and meet a bunch of wonderful filmmakers from Texas and from all over the country. So I've had a wonderful experience being able to be here and have the film here, and of course having Sarah Ivy, this her hometown, makes it that much more special. But one thing we're really excited about is the fact that the film is fully accessible. So any blind or deaf audience member can access the film just as any sighted person. And that's a service that not many films at any film festivals we've been to so far have offered. And we feel that the whole point of the message of our film is about blind people should have equal access to things, whether it be in education or employment or sports or organizations, that we should provide, when we can, the same exact experience. So we have headsets, so anytime anyone goes to see the film here at Dallas or anywhere else we're playing, that a blind audience member can wear the headsets, and any of the information that's on screen that's only visual, that you can't hear through dialogue or sound or music, is described visually. So they'll describe, a young man skates down the street. Or it's almost like reading a screenplay. All of the information that's not via dialogue or sound is described. So a blind person has the exact same ability to understand and take in and enjoy the film, just like any other sighted audience member.
That's such a good thing to hear. That's so amazing. Where do you see this film going from here? Not just extending the festival run, but educationally, just people should see this.
We want to do everything we can to put this inside of schools. Obviously, a huge theme that we're looking at is education, access to education, like we said, both socially, economically. And so I don't know if you saw some of the statistics at the end of the film, but there's, approximately 1 in 3 blind adults don't have a high school education and 70% unemployment rate. So when you look at statistics like that, it's pretty, it's a shock to a lot of people. And so we would love to have the ability to put this in front of teachers, in front of educators, in front of districts, and in front of students, both blind and sighted, to be able to kind of raise awareness and hopefully the next time a teacher or a student or an employer is interacting with a blind person, should that happen, they have a different take on it than they would have before seeing the film.
Kind of final question with that then. Because it is personal with these kids, and you guys aren't making, like you said, maybe in your old documentary where there was a lot of talking head material and there's a lot of, stats to take in. Because it is personal, do you hope that people will see what these kids are doing and realize that 70% is atrocious to think about unemployment? Right. People are leaving these kids behind, and these kids are proof that they shouldn't be. Is that kind of the main crux?
Absolutely. If you think about who are the blind people you know about, unless you know someone within your own community or your family or your friend group, most of the time there's 2 images that come to mind. They call them the super crips. So like, you take somebody like Stevie Wonder or the guy who climbed Mount Everest, or you hear these extraordinary stories of people doing incredible things that you say, wow, that's amazing. I never knew a blind person could do that. And then you have the image of, a blind person who's maybe on the street begging for money. And that's a common image that people, unfortunately, think of or, have seen in their life. What we're not thinking of as oftentimes is the blind person who's the lawyer, or the blind person who's a professor, or the blind person who's a mother. And so for us, the idea was, let's show just regular teenagers who are having, in a band with their friends, who are trying to study abroad, doing things that regular teenagers do, and not depicting them any other way except for as regular teenagers. So we just wanted to show that human experience, which is a very real one and a very rich one and a very interesting and exciting one, and especially because these kids are they don't have necessarily role models, blind role models that are in their families or schools or communities. So, they often have support through the organizations, but generally speaking, they're figuring it out on their own. How does the world see me? How do I have to figure out how to navigate this world where people don't get me, people don't get what I'm capable of, people underestimate me. So at that point in their lives, it's a trajectory where they could either step it up and say, you know what, I'm going to become sponsored, so nobody can, tell me I can't, I'm not going to be successful in life, or I'm going to figure out a way to Portugal, or I'm going to overcome this battle, and that oftentimes sets a trajectory for the rest of their life. And too often, these kids with disabilities, or blind kids specifically, don't actually take the initiative to overcome those things, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In fact, that they themselves don't feel like they can reach their own expectations. Sorry, that was really long-winded, but
no, but I thank you for sharing that, because I think that's important for people to understand that what they're going to see is 4 amazing kids that they just happen to be blind, but they are succeeding in life.
They are.
Thank you for making the film, and thank you for bringing it to Dallas.
Thank
We're
you,
really
buddy.
excited.
Yeah, so great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.